Hello, this is Houston SWL. Thanks again for having me be part of your guest broadcast on the Voice of Shortwave radio program via WRMI. You can check out my YouTube channel, Houston SWL. I have a number of videos that might be interesting for your viewers. Today I'm going to talk about the Grundig G5, G3, and Eton Elite Executive radios. If you looked at these radios, you'll notice that they have a lot of similarities in the case design, the layout, the buttons, the features. So that'll be the discussion topic today, and I'm going to also go through a little history of Grundig. So Grundig was founded in 1945 by Max Grundig in Nuremberg, Germany, initially focusing on producing radios, and they gained popularity pretty quickly post-war. In the 1950s, Grundig expanded its product line to include televisions and tape recorders. By the 1960s and 70s, they'd established a strong international presence, exporting products worldwide, and became synonymous with quality in consumer electronics. And then in the 70s, Philips began acquiring Grundig shares, leading to a complete control in 1993. But by 1998, Philips had divested Grundig, and Grundig filed for bankruptcy in April 2003 after years of losses, mainly due to the cheaper Asian competitors that were coming into the market. Most of the former Grundig business was acquired by a Turkish-British joint venture of Beko and Alba in 2004. And in 2007, Koch Holdings, the parent company of Beko, acquired full ownership of Grundig and put the brand under its home appliances subsidiary Arçelik AS. And so the brand is now part of the Turkish company Arçelik AS, which acquired it in 2007. Grundig continues to provide a range of consumer electronics, including radios, televisions, and home appliances. Maybe you might be, like myself, wondering what's the difference between Eton and Grundig, because I'm going to be talking about the Grundig G5, and there's a radio branded as the Eton E5, which is basically the same radio. So the Eton Corporation is an American company established in 1986 based in Palo Alto, California. Formerly known as Lextronics, it produces solar-powered and hand-cranked shortwave and emergency radios sold in retail stores and online. So Eton started out as a licensee for Grundig shortwave radios, and that partnership continues today. It also sells Grundig branded radios in North America and Europe. And going back to the 1980s, the Eton Corporation had taken over developing, manufacturing, and selling Grundig shortwave radios in North America and some other markets. And to date, this arrangement still stands, which is why you'll find Grundig shortwave radios being sold by Eton. I'm going to go into the Grundig G5. If you can check out my YouTube page, I have a number of videos on the G5, using it, showing it picking up different shortwave stations, but a lot of the information I'm going to be using today came out of a really great website online, radiojallen.com. He's done quite a number of reviews on shortwave radio, so check that out. But the Grundig G5, it was introduced around 2006, so this is the earliest of the three. The design was based on the Degen DE1103, Kaito KA1103 radios, which offered a level of performance versus price that was unheard in a travel-size radio at the time. It looks like the Eton E5/Grundig G5, same radio, sold for about $150 when it was introduced. It came with an AC adapter, carrying case, stereo earbuds, wire antenna, and an owner's manual in several languages. Pulled in AM, FM, longwave, and shortwave, those different bands. It was a dual conversion design offering single sideband reception. Has a fine tuning thumb wheel on the side. Dual bandwidths, wide and narrow, a line output. offered 700 memories and 100 pages with alphanumeric tagging, 24-hour clock with 4 alarms and a sleep timer, local DX switch, external antenna jack, earphone jack that provided FM stereo. It used 4 AA batteries, had a lighted LCD display, and the radio would also internally recharge nickel metal hydride batteries, but it wasn't a smart charger. So you have to use some of the buttons to dial in the correct charging time for the capacity of the batteries you were using. So I guess currently I think most people would probably just charge batteries on an external charger and then put them into the radio. It had an automatic tuning storage of local FM frequencies and 2 auto scan modes. Tuning was done by 4 different methods. The traditional keypad entry type method. It has up-down slewing buttons that could be selectable for either 9 or 10 kilohertz steps, depending on what country, part of the world that you're in. 5 kilohertz for shortwave, steps for shortwave. You can either also do a auto seek. You could hold down the up-down buttons for about 2 seconds, and it would automatically scan up and down until it found a station and stop. And then the tuning knob on the right side, you could manually tune that in 1 kilohertz steps. That wasn't selectable to 5 kilohertz steps. So I guess the G5 provided a dedicated volume up-down buttons that were kind of a complaint of the Degen 1103 that it was based on, and there was no muting or chuffing when tuning via the knob. You could tap the light button for get 15 seconds of illumination. The LCD was, in my opinion, kind of a cool looking blue backlight. And with the batteries, it would only stay illuminated about 15 seconds, but if you had the AC adapter plugged in, it would stay on all the time. Had an external antenna socket, was the 1/8 inch mono mini jack, and that could be used actually for external AM as well as shortwave. So that was kind of a neat feature. And just from the J. Allen review, I guess he commented about the E5 G5 radio. He says it's the most sensitive radio in this size I have ever tested, matched by the Degen 1103, Kaito 1103, of course. I plugged in the supplied shortwave wire antenna, and my reception improved noticeably. The single sideband performance was solid and stable. The local DX switch often improved things substantially in this mode. Comparing it with my trusty Sony 7600GR, the E5 proved slightly more sensitive on AM and shortwave and noticeably more sensitive and selective on FM. And the E5 is now the second from the top of the line, headed by the Grundig or E1 radio, which was about $500. Second was the G5 at about $150, and then there was the Eton E10 at about $130. So kind of a final summation of the Grundig G5. He says, I've long considered it to offer the best performance available anywhere near this size and price range. The G5 and identical Eton E5 were based on the popular and still available Degen DE 1103, Kaito KA 1103, and were essentially the same radio with a redesigned user interface to include up-down volume buttons. But the performance was the thing. Whether you have an 1103 or E5 or a G5, you have in your hands a radio with phenomenal RF capability in this size and price class. On all bands, AM, shortwave, FM, these radios pull in signals like a magnet. They feature amazing sensitivity, a low noise floor, and great selectivity. There's just no other radio this size or price that will hear as many listenable signals, and in the world of smaller portable radios, that's a primary concern. They also sound very pleasant for their size and make great travel companions. So I do have the Grundig G5 and also the G3. And I guess, I would second, with an external antenna It's really sensitive. Actually, I think it's just as sensitive as my tabletop Grundig Satellite 750. And so that's what I'm using most of the time now. But definitely a good radio. And you can still find some on eBay and probably being sold on other platforms. So if you can find one at a good price, I highly recommend it. And so the next, so the Grundig G5, Eton E5 came out around 2006, and then roughly 3 years later, in 2009, the Grundig G3 Globe Traveler came out. If you look at these two radios, they look basically the same. I guess some of the button features are a little bit different, but the footprint's the same. So the G3 has the same features that I've gone over on the G5, but it added some new ones. So it also now covers the air band. The G5 did not have that. It comes with the radio data system on FM to display information about the signal that's being broadcast on the FM band. It has a synchronous detector with selectable sideband. I guess the single sideband feature was updated on the G5. There was just one button that you would push, and then you'd use the fine-tuning wheel to tune in the single sideband signal. I guess it has the button that you can press once to get either upper or lower sideband, and if you press it again, it'll give you the opposite, but it still used the fine scroll wheel on the side. So that was an improvement. It had the same two bandwidths that the G5 had, but now the G3 also had a line output that the G5 did not have, which is also a nice feature. Again, it has the 700 randomly programmable memories as the G5. They both have a clock, sleep timer, 4 alarms, LCD display, headphone jacks. They were the 4 different tuning methods. That's all the same. So it also used the 4 AA batteries, and it could also internally charge the nickel metal hydride batteries, but with the similar restrictions as the G5 AC adapter, and it also sold for roughly about $150 when it came out. So a lot of people were actually excited about the G3 when it came out because of these additional features and the the sensitivity of the radio. If it was similar to the G5, it was really a neat upgrade. As he said on the J. Allen site, one of the most important improvements is the addition of synchronous detection. And I guess, again, people were excited about the airband, the RDS system, the line input. But in his review, I guess when he had gotten the G3, I guess it ended up having some problems. He ended up having to send it back. The synchronous detection or detector would only lock onto very strong signals. The AM band was full of birdies and spurious noises. Shortwave was not bad, but not quite as good as the G5, E5, in his opinion. Other people were having issues, so it looks like the initial release of the G3, there were some quality control issues. So I guess a while later he did acquire another G3, and it looks like Grundig had resolved those issues, and then he ended up doing a comparison with his G5, spent several weeks band scanning on both radios. And he says in terms of reception, the GE runs neck and neck with the earlier models, like the G5, with each having certain pros and cons. On shortwave, he said they seemed identical. The dual bandwidths were well chosen. He said the G3 has a slightly mellower tone quality, and the G3 sync detection provided dramatic improvements on some signals. I guess in the AM mode, the G3 was similar, but just slightly less sensitive than the G5, E5. On FM, the G3 was slightly less sensitive than the G5, but was more selective and better at rejecting false images. The single sideband, the G3 offers greatly improved SSB performance. You can now select upper and lower sideband modes at the press of a button, which makes tuning SSB much easier. You then perform the coarse tuning with the tuning knob and finally zero in for best audio using the fine-tuning thumb wheel. Yeah, it is a little bit of a hassle using the G5 and fine-tuning the single sideband in. And as I'll talk about the Eton Elite Executive, I guess that's even easier on that radio. So after he had reviewed the later model version of the G3, I guess he recommended it, but I guess then later down the line, I guess he started hearing of people again having issues with the G3, so couldn't recommend it based on that. But I guess if you could still find one, it may be kind of a hit or miss. Maybe get a G3 radio that doesn't have problems and some that may. So I did purchase one on eBay. Didn't spend a lot for it, but there are some issues with my G3. I guess the airband, it doesn't manually seek, and if you plug in the external antenna, you get some spurious signals on some of the frequencies. So just be aware of that. And so the final radio I'm going to talk about is the Eton Elite Executive. The first, I guess, version of the radio was released around 2014. And so it was initially called the Eton Satellite. And I guess J. Allen calls this the version 1. I guess I've gone on eBay and seen those radios being sold, labeled the Eton Satellite. It was an evolution of the earlier Eton radios like the E5, G5, and G3. Shortly after, it was rebadged with the name the Grundig Edition, and J. Allen called this the version 1A. So there were some modifications made to the Grundig Edition, which slightly reduced muting while tuning, had a brighter display, and looks like there was some rewiring of the auxiliary antenna jack. And then about 3 years later, in the spring of 2017, Eton released what he would call the version 2, or the Executive Satellite. It kept the same cabinet and control layout, but the radio was now silver and supplied with an integrated tan leather hard case, and the case fastens with magnetic snaps, and that's similar to the Eton Elite Executive that you can get today. And I'd gotten one of those on eBay because there was a lot of, I guess, traffic about that because they were going fairly cheaply. People buying them from anywhere from $40 to $60. I got mine for around $60. And I'll talk about the features shortly. And then in 2019, about 2 years after the version 2 of the Executive Satellite, they rebranded the radio with the Elite designation and called it the Elite Executive. So it reverted back to the darker color, and it has the tan leather case with the magnetic snaps. So he checked the Eton Elite Executive with the Executive Satellite, the second version, and basically the two radios behaved absolutely identically, so they were the same radio, so like just given a different brand name and the color change. The Elite Executive, like the Executive Satellite and the Satellite Grundig Edition, he says were his favorite travel size radios for their size, RF performance, especially on AM, and overall good design. He did have one quibble, which I've noticed as well on the Eton Elite Executive, that the on-off switch, you generally have to press that twice to make it work. Not always, but usually that's the case, which is a little strange. It has a different type of a toggle power off on type button as opposed to the G5 and G3, which you just rounder button, you just press once and don't have that problem. And you can toggle the I guess the tuning wheel you can select for 1 kilohertz steps, similar to the G5 and G3, but you can also press the center and go to 5 kilohertz steps. So that's a change. On the front, they replaced the volume and up and down buttons that were on the G5 and G3, and now those are used for wide, narrow bandwidth filters. You can select up and down. There's 5 of those. The single sideband is a kind of an updated feature that is nice. I guess it automatically tunes in the single sideband signal. You can select upper or lower, but there's no fine tuning wheel to dial it in, which is really nice. So they've replaced that fine tuning wheel on the side with a volume wheel. And so basically it's G3, just rebranded and has some other slight modifications. But again, if you look at the face of the 3 radios and the features on the side, they're really the same radio basically. So I do have a video that I made. It's on my YouTube channel, looking at the G5, the G3, and the Eton Elite Executive, and some of the features and differences and similarities between those radios. So just check those out. So again, the Eton Elite Executive, like the Grundig G3, has AM/FM long-wave, shortwave bands, airband, has the radio data system for FM like the G3, FM stereo via the headphone jack, has the synchronous detector like the G3, 700 memory stations, phase lock loop, conversion receiver, local DX switch, local world time zones you can enter in, has the same clock, alarm, sleep time features. I guess the one difference is the LCD display is orange instead of blue like the G3 and G5, which is kind of cool. A reset lock button, same as the G5, G3, and it comes with the power supply and uses 4 AA batteries. So, definitely similar radios, and I would, highly recommend any of the 3, maybe not as much for the G3 because of the quality control issues that they had. But again, if you can find one fairly cheaply, I'd say it'd be worth it buying it to try to get a decent radio. So that's what I wanted to go through today. So again, thanks for having me as a guest on your Voice of Shortwave radio broadcast, and talk to you guys later. Mahalo.